QuickBooks Online 2026. Creating comparative balance sheet reports, taking the standard balance sheet report, adding multiple periods, whether those be days, weeks, months, quarters, years, also taking two periods, subtracting the difference between them, looking at the percentage change between them, thinking about the vast amount of reports we can create just by having different comparisons between different periods, leading us to think about what would be the optimal reports that we should create for a supervisor or client on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, yearly basis, and so on. So get ready and some coffee because we're sketching out the bookkeeping process outline with QuickBooks Online 2026. Searching for the free QuickBooks Online sample company file as we do every time, simply typing into our favorite browser, QuickBooks Online Test Drive, looking for the result that has intuit.com in the URL. And then, of course, we're going to need to verify that we're not a robot, Ara.
Please, if verifying I wasn't one would actually work, Intuit would have charged extra for it.
That's right. So that's why I have to click. So you wouldn't be able to do those tests that I just did. I just clicked on 3 stop lights, which artificial intelligence can't do.
Or maybe I just hate getting caught at jaywalking.
Possibly. All right, let's go to the reports on the left-hand side. Open up the balance sheet reports like we do every time. In the favorites, we're going to right-click on that balance sheet report to open a link in a new tab. Right-clicking on the profit and loss report to open a link in a new tab. Then we're going to tab over to that balance sheet report. We're going to close up any pop-ups. We're going to put the date range back in 2025 because even though we're in 2026, the data is in 2025, as we will see on the profit and loss shortly. So let's go from 010125 tab, 123125 tab, and then we'll tab on over to the profit and loss, the P to the L. Nothing's in it because the data's not in 2026 yet. Therefore, 010125 tab, 123125 tab. All right, let's go back to that balance sheet report. In prior presentations or sections or course, we took a look at the general layout in terms of the ribbon and the functionality we have to adjust not only the balance sheet report, but basically any report is similar. However, different types of reports will have different functionality when we use these tools, dependent largely upon whether we're talking about a balance sheet type report, which is as of a point in time, or an income statement type of report, which has a time frame, or if we're looking at a detailed report, it was the third category I would categorize as, like the transaction detailed report, which is going to have a lot more columns involved in it and therefore be subject to things like filtering type of options. And by the way, these more detailed reports are almost always timing reports, even though I drilled on a balance sheet type of account because the data within it is dependent upon a time range, the dates that are making up that particular account. All right, let's go back to the balance sheet. So what I want to do now is look at a comparative type of report, noting we looked at all of the reports in general, and there's some default comparative reports that are already made. If I go over to the reports on the left-hand side, in the reports under the overview, you see that we have the balance sheet standard. We've got the comparative, the balance sheet comparison. What is that? Well, it's going to be comparing multiple periods. So we can basically create this comparative report ourselves, which I would recommend doing, allowing you to know how to do it and also giving you the flexibility to make more customized comparisons. So we have the detailed balance sheet, the balance sheet summary, and so there it is. So we only have one comparative report. Now note there's multiple different ways that you can process or compare the balance sheet. So let's go back on over to the balance sheet and see a few of those. So the basic idea would be with the balance sheet, as with the income statement or any type of report, I could compare 2 periods or multiple periods. Now, if I compare just 2 periods, then I have the option of subtracting the 2 periods line by line, taking the difference and possibly the percentage change, which we call a horizontal analysis oftentimes in textbooks. If I have more than 2 columns, however, then I can't really take a subtraction between them unless I have a more complex report, which QuickBooks doesn't generally provide for. So let's look at the first option, saying that I want to compare 2 or more options, not looking at the difference between them, and I want to put the chronological order in the order in which they happened, oldest date first, newest date on the right. And by doing that, then I will have the most important data too far to the right, but it'll be in chronological order. The way we do that is we set the time range for the full period that I want to have covered, and then we change the selection here in the drop down. We could do it by customers, but we're not really thinking by customers or products or services, days. We're looking at period by period. Now, I could compare days, but that's not the typical thing. We could compare weeks, but that's not typical either. If I wanted to compare weeks, I would most likely run the report for 1 month, for example, and then compare the weeks. So it would give me columns week by week. I could compare months. That's more common. However, months is still 12 months. That's kind of a lot within a year. It might be more common to run months as a subset of a quarterly range, meaning I might put this from October to December and then run the months within the quarter. A quarter would make more sense with the range that we're currently in. So I've given myself a range of January to December. If I divide that by 4, that would give us 4 quarters of 3 months each, 12 divided by 3. So let's do that. Let's go into quarters. And what happens? Notice that the data is pretty simple. It would be nice if they gave us more data for the whole year, but they don't. They only have data in the last 2 quarters. So we have January through March, has no data in it. April through June, no data in it. July through September, there's some data, some activity has happened. And October through December, activity has happened. Noting we're in a balance sheet report, so this format might not be as useful because this is showing us where we are standing at a particular point in time. In other words, I can't compile these 2 together. That wouldn't make any sense. Taking the difference between 2 columns would make more sense. Let's go to the profit and loss and do the same thing. If I make this by quarter, just as comparison, we'll look at the profit and loss later. But because this is a timing report, we have another total down here. Why? Because the total makes sense. Because now we have the quarter, last quarter, all quarters, nothing happened, stuff happened. If we add them all up, that would give us the year-to-date total. So these numbers are the same as the numbers we started with, and we can break that number out into the cumulative chunks that have added up to it, either daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and so on. Whereas over here, this is already the end result. So it doesn't make any sense to add up these things. This is just telling us where we stand, how much assets we had as of the end of the quarter. Also noting the quarter range is July through September, but really it's only as of the end of September that these numbers are, because it's a point in time report. The range doesn't really matter. You might adjust the headings of this report to show that, to just say this is the end of quarter 1, end of quarter 2, end of quarter 3, and end of quarter 4, because again, the range is a little deceptive of a name. Correct, Ara?
Correct. On a balance sheet, the range is more of a poetic license. All they really want is the last day of that range. So whatever fits your poetry is fine.
So if I hit the drop down, we could do years. Now, if I do years this way, then I might bring this back to like a few years. So I could say this is going to be 2023. That looks a little strange at first when you enter the date range in. So if I went back to the normal status, it's like it's going to be a 3. If I put January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2025, that seems weird. What data is here? Well, it's the same data as though I put this first date range as of 12/31/2025. There's no difference because this is as of a point in time. Why do we have a range up here? Well, we have a range up here in part because if I drill down on this data, it's going to give me the transaction detail for 3 years. And it's going to be allowing us to do the comparative reports because now I can hit the drop down and go into years, and the years make sense. So now it's going to give us 23, 24, 25. There was no data in 23 or 24, so we only have data in 2025. Similarly, we can do that with the profit and loss report, noting that the profit and loss report may not accumulate it upwards to have, because these are 3 different years. Normally, it will accumulate and close out on a yearly basis. So you would think on a profit and loss, is it going to give me 3 years and then a 3-year-to-year total? Possibly not, because QuickBooks likes to close everything out on a yearly basis. But that's going to be the general idea. If I hit the drop down again, we've got vendors. Okay. Now, the other way we can do it is have a 2-year comparison. Let's bring this back up to the standard. So we have a normal balance sheet, and let's put the range from 01/01/25 to 12/31/25. And now let's say, well, what I would like to do is do a difference between 2 periods. Where did I stand at the end of last month compared to this month? Last year compared to this year? 2-period comparisons are great because then they allow us not just to see the 2 periods, the 2 columns, but also take the difference, subtract the 2 columns, in other words, and take the percentage change of the 2 columns. So 2-period comparisons are great. Oftentimes when you have a 2-period comparison, you're going to want the current data up front. Why? Because that's the most important data. You're taking the current data, year-to-date numbers, minus last period. If you compare this to normal like job stats, for example, like a baseball player, let's say, you would take their batting average in the current period minus the prior period, right? That's kind of how the period over period calculation would work. So if I look at the comparisons, those are going to be in this, wait a sec, not there. They're in this drop down. So we have the previous year to date. So the previous year to date is going to compare this period to the prior period year to date. So right now I have the entire year. So if I want to compare 2025 to 2024, then one way I could do it is I could say the whole year here and look at the previous year to date, right? And then that's going to give us as of December 2025 and then prior year 2024. Now, it's likely that if I use this previous year, then I might want to look at the partial period. Let's say I'm just going from 01/01/25 to 09/31/25. I'm trying to get where the data is. There's only 30 days, 09/30/25. So now I have as of September 30th, 2025, and the prior year as of September 30th. Now, nothing was in the prior year. I'm just trying to show that we're going to have a year to date in the current period versus the prior period, same time frame, right? First 3 quarters or the end of the 3rd quarter, and then compared to the end of the 3rd quarter. Now, if we did that over here, the first date matters, meaning it matters that this is January through 9/30. On the balance sheet, it doesn't matter because it's both of these are as of the end of 9/30. If this is on the profit and loss, it's the revenue that has accumulated from January to 9/30 in 2025 versus 2024. We will go into the profit and loss in more detail in future presentations to do a comparative report, but just wanting to note the difference here. Although the date range comparisons are kind of similar, there's differences there in the result. So that's one comparison. We compare as we go throughout the year. You might start thinking, how am I going to compile my reports so that I can give them to, say, clients or supervisors in an efficient way? You might want to give them a package from period to period, monthly, quarterly and or yearly. So you might give them a standard balance sheet, but you also might, as you go through the quarter, compare the current year to the previous year to date. And you might also say, well, now I can also want to show the change. That would be the dollar change. So now we have this period minus the prior period. And you also might want to have the percentage change, right? That would be the common, what we call horizontal analysis comparative report. So that would be great, although it's not you can't see much going on with the percentages because there was no data in 2024. So if I hit the drop down again, what if I have the other option of the previous period and then a custom period? Let's go to the previous period this time. So what I want to do is say, let's imagine that I want to compare December 31st to November. So I would have to do my period then 0101 or the end of the month. So it's going to be 12/01/25 to 12/31/25. So now I have 1 month time range, which sometimes you might be able to do with the drop down if it's the current month or the previous month. But if not, it's generally pretty easy to put the date range in. And then when I hit the drop down, now, like if I go back to the norm, it would look like this, right? If I go back to the norm, that would be my normal balance sheet, noting that the normal balance sheet would be the same, once again, no matter what the beginning date is, unlike the income statement, because it's as of the end point. But I need to use the 1 month period in order to use this functionality to show the previous period. Because now I can say, if I want the previous period, it's going to take the previous month. And it's already marking off the percentage change and the dollar change. So this might be one of the most common type of reports that we can have for a comparative type of report, because now we're looking at, and it might be more common on a profit and loss than a balance sheet, but it could be useful on a balance sheet because now we're saying, where do we stand as of the end of December versus the end of November? Now, again, the system only put data in for like 1 month, so most of them are exactly the same. Here's one that's a little bit different. So let's take a look at that horizontal analysis. Where's my calculator? Trusty calculator. So we can go.
Or you can.
Okay, so we can go, this one is going to be this one right here, right? So now I have, this is the current period. So like you can imagine, this would be the same with baseball stats and like batting averages. And remember that any kind of measurement of performance is the same. So any job you're in, you have the same kind of statistical type of analysis, meaning how did you do this period? If you're a teacher, well, how many people were absent this quarter versus last quarter, and what's the percentage change in it and whatnot? So it would be 157.72 minus the 123.72. So we have an increase of 34. So that's good, 34. But oftentimes that 34 increase isn't something that is useful when I compare to multiple periods or to other companies that have different dollar amounts, but may have similar percent changes as time passes due to similarities in the market. So if I'm in a particular industry, then the dollar amount change isn't going to help me as I benchmark to whoever my hero is, whoever I'm trying to copy because they make a lot of money or whatever. What I might be able to compare is the percentage change, right? And this is same with the batting averages, right? So if one batter had, a 300, a 30% batting average, 300, right? And then but you're comparing it to someone else. I mean, if one batter got on base so many times and you're comparing it to someone else, but they had less at bats, right? You're comparing apples and oranges if you just count the number. So you could do the comparison. So I can take that and say, I have a difference then of 34 divided by the prior period, which is 123, that's a period 3.72. So that would be moving the decimal 2 places over, 27.48. That's what that percentage change is saying. So that could be, again, useful when you're making comparisons to other companies and whatnot. Very, very common tool. So if you're building a batch of reports, this would be a common type of report. However, you can do the same thing instead of on a month-by-month basis. We saw that we can do it month by month. We can do it comparing the current month to the prior year. We can do it year to date in the current period to the prior year. We can also do it in the current period, the current quarter to the prior quarter. We can take the current half of the year compared to the last half of the year. We can take the current quarter compared to last year's quarter, right? The last quarter of this year compared to the last quarter of last year. So these comparative reports mean that you have multiple different ways you can show the reports. Also, we have this issue of this column right here is the balance sheet, right? So even though this is a much more complicated report, it actually gives you all the data in the standard balance sheet report. It just adds more data. So there's pros and cons to that. So why is that important? Because if you're talking to someone, like if you're trying to batch something together, or if you're putting up a presentation with somebody, the more complicated the report is, the more likely they're going to roll their eyes and they're not going to listen to you. They're going to think you're too wonky, right? So that means you have to gauge, if I'm presenting something, I might want to start with a summary balance sheet and then possibly maybe a summary comparative balance sheet report, which is these collapsed, or I might want to collapse all of these or something like that. And then expand it to a more detailed comparative balance sheet report. All right. And then the other problem is, well, what if I combine these things together in a standard batch of reports that I give monthly, quarterly, yearly? You can have a different set of reports that you might put together depending on where you are in the year, right? Because if you're in the first month of the year, you don't really have many comparative reports except to the prior period. So you might want to add those more. You might want to lean into those just so you can put some more reports and have a bigger kind of set of reports. If you're in the second quarter, now you can compare the first quarter of the current year to the first quarter of the prior year, and the first 2 quarters of the current period to the 2 quarters of the prior period. So you might then prioritize the current quarter comparisons over the comparisons to the prior quarter, right? So you might start comparing quarter 2 to the prior quarter 2 and not give more reports on quarter 1 compared to the prior quarter, right? If you go to the third quarter, now you've got multiple quarters that you can compare, because you can compare the third quarter to the second quarter, the third quarter to the first quarter, right? You can compare it to the prior quarter. You can compare it to the third quarter to date, current year to last year. And then, of course, at the end of the year, you have all 4 quarters to compare, all 12 months to compare, and all the comparisons to the prior periods as well as the prior period to date, right? Kind of information. So that means you want to think about how you can optimize your reports so that you might have sometimes when you want to duplicate information, so I can show the simple format and then the more complex report. Or you might think of it as, I already have that information in my more complex report, so I'm not going to do the simple report. I'm just going to give the more complex report. So all that depends on who you're giving the information to, right? If you're giving to someone who's numbers oriented, then you might want to give them more detail, and you might not need to give them the summary reports if they know the reports backwards and forwards, and they want to look at a more complex report. If you're dealing with someone that doesn't know the numbers, then you want to give them more basic reports and possibly not overwhelm them with too many reports, maybe focusing more on the formatting, the look and feel, like a Steve Jobs type thing, just to make them comfortable that you're putting effort in without just overwhelming them with numbers, right? That because they won't like that, right? But they might like that you made the font nice or something, right? Which is, which shows you put effort in, right? Right, Ara?
Exactly. Give them a glossy spreadsheet instead of a novel. Same numbers, but no one throws a glossy one in the trash.
Right. Okay. So in any case, so we could go quarter to quarter. What if I wanted to go like current quarter compared to last quarter? then again, it doesn't make as much sense to do it this way in a balance sheet report, because you're really looking at the last period. But again, so if I go from 10/01/25, so now I'm comparing as of 10/31 to September 30th, meaning the end of the third quarter and the end of the last quarter, right? So we can do those types of comparative reports. So that's good. And we have all the data in here. So that's a good comparative report. Now, a couple other things on the formatting side of things. So if we look at this thing, now we've got a balance sheet report, we've got the name, but then it says as of December 31st, 2025. That no longer really makes sense, does it? Because now, I mean, we've got these headers down here. We have 2 periods. So it's as of December 2024 and 2025. So I might want to delete this bit. I might want to change the name. It shouldn't really be a balance sheet report at this point. It's some kind of comparative balance sheet report, right? And more specifically, I'm comparing quarter to quarter balance sheet reports. And then down here, this total, I don't see why that is useful at all. I'd like to delete it, but you can't really do it. Like this whole row isn't really doing anything useful, in my opinion. If you export it to Excel, then I can delete that row. I don't think you can really get rid of it in QuickBooks. And then again, these headers, as of December 31st, that makes sense. As of September 30th, but this PP, do I really need it to say PP, prior period? I don't really think that's very useful. So I'd like to delete it. I'm not sure you can under the current report system, but you could export it to Excel and delete that. We have the dollar change, PP, prior period, percentage change, okay? So what kind of things can I adjust here if I was to go up and say, okay, if I was going to give this to someone else, I can say I have my filters. That's not very useful. Number formatting. So I could divide by 1,000. That's not that useful because it's not that high of dollars, but I might want to round it. If it's for external reporting, I don't really need the pennies. I'm going to trim it down because that's not really helping anybody with decision making. I might want to put the negative numbers bracketed. Now, when I put the negative numbers bracketed, I don't think it's going to bracket the percents that are negative, which is kind of annoying, but it should put the negatives here. So maybe I want to bracket the negatives to make them stand out a bit, and then maybe I want to make them red. So there's that. And so now this one didn't go bracketed for the percentages, but they are red. Now, if I hit the drop down, if this is for external reporting purposes, I might like that 0 column or row. I might not want that. Now, I can't get rid of it here because this one has a number in it. But, if there wasn't a number in it, instead of going active, I might go to non-zero. I want to show only the non-zero ones for external reporting. For internal reporting, I would want the actives because I would want to drill down on it. And then we might want the company logo if we had one. Report period, do I need that on the footer? I don't think so. Do I need this date and whatnot? Typically not. So oftentimes I would remove the information on the report period. Wait a sec. No, that's up top. This is the header. This is the report period up top. Now that doesn't make sense for me because again, the date is really down here. So I can remove that altogether. Company name, I'll keep that. I'll keep it centered. On the footer, this is the footer. I don't need any of this stuff. So I'm going to remove the date prepared on the footer, the time prepared, don't really need that. Report basis, I don't really need any of that on the footer. Thank you very much. And wait a sec, report basis. And then down here we've got then edit section titles. Edit the section titles. Does it allow me? So here we go. So these section titles are giving me these sections, which is cool because I might want to make this like bank accounts. Maybe I want to make that, if it's external reporting, I might want to make that cash and cash equivalents. If I spelled that right. I might want to make the fixed assets, property, plant, and equipment, property, plant, and equipment, maybe. maybe spell property right or something like that. Okay, so that's basically the formatting that I can do here. And so now we've got a report that's a little bit nicer. Now I'd also, to change the header, there used to be a change the header thing over here, but now they have it here. So, and I deleted the company name. Let's just go into that little thing and say this is a comparative balance sheet. And I might want to put comparative by quarter balance sheet or something up top. And then I might want to copy that because I might want to then save it. Now, if this is going to be something that I'm going to do every quarter, or maybe I want to make a batch of reports that will be standard for each quarter, meaning quarter 1 batch of reports, quarter 2 batch, quarter 3 batch, which will be customized, so I will not have to re-customize every time. Then I might hit the drop down up top and say add, I could say drop down schedule report, add to management report. Why isn't it giving me the other two? So normally you would have like memorized reports right here. I think the sample company is basically walking out on that because when you log out, it resets. So I would like to memorize this as a group, meaning if I go to the reports on the left-hand side and I go to the reports here and we go into the custom reports right there, custom reports, then I'd like to bring it into here, into the custom memorized reports, and possibly put it under a header of quarter 1 report or quarter 4 reports or something like that. It's kind of annoying it doesn't let me do that. If I do it this way, this would add it to the management reports. So that could add it to the management reports, which if I go back on over here, are under these items. Normally I would make the memorized reports and then add them to the management reports, but we might look at that later. Okay, so then we have, that's going to be the basic layout. Now, if you wanted to do some more customization on the formatting, like get rid of this or change these headers in some way, get rid of the PPs, then you can export to Excel. So I'm going to say, let's say that we would export it to Excel. All right, so I'm going to say, let's go ahead and export to Excel. So there it goes. It's going to go into here. I'm going to say, I'm going to put it in this location, Craig's Design and Landscaping Services. So I might want to rename it Comparative. That looks good. And then I'm going to say Comparative Balance Sheet. Okay. And then let's just keep it at that. So I'll say, okay, that's Comparative Balance Sheet. So if I go into that, then I open that up and go, boom. There it is. I'm going to open that up and see what we have. Let's bring this down. Okay, so there's our Comparative Balance Sheet report. Now I could like view it in this way and then back over here because that shows me where the page break is. So this is a longer report. So just note, if you do this in Excel, I would like to format it as much as I can without having to force the change from a standard portrait to a landscape. So there's a lot of space between here. So I could bring this column in a bit. Let me see if I can show the ribbons. And so then over here, I don't really need this whole total column. So I'm just going to delete that whole row because I don't think that is useful to me. December 31st, 2025, do I need the as of? Not really. I can get rid of the as of. I can get rid of the as of here. I can get rid of the PP over here.
Yeah, it's just noise. Ditch the as
and
of.
Then
Date
the PPs here. Let's get rid of this. I don't really need the PP here. That's not useful. And that lets me tighten these up. So if I select these and double click, it tightens them up. And then of course I could do a lot more formatting if I wanted to. Maybe, for example, I'd rather use the underline. for the underline and then have a grid line format. I'm not saying this would be the best thing to do. I'm just saying one thing you might do is say, okay, what if I want grids, lines all the way across? That might be a little bit easier to see. Then I need to replace these hard-code lines with just the standard underline,
Easy. Just
underline, and then underline, and then underline. It's a little tedious, yes, but this is what I mean by if you spend if you're dealing with clients that are more aesthetically pleased than numbers pleased, this might be more impressive than going crazy on the number, right? So then going crazy on making very detailed reports. And then you could box it like that. You might make the headers up here. You can make the headers like black and white on the headers, maybe, so it's kind of more bold like that. Notice that there's a space when I look at the space, and it moves it to the left. So I could add a column here, insert, so that I try to get an equal space on these two sides. So I want to make those two columns like evenly spaced so that the report's like in the middle of the page. So then I could do something like that. And so now if I go back, so I'm not trying to say I'm an expert at this formatting. I'm not Steve Jobs, I'm an accountant, but I'm just saying this might be something that you could that you can format it a little bit more uniquely. Of course, you can change the fonts and all that kind of stuff here with pretty fast by just exporting it. And if you have multiple reports, I can print all these reports on each tab, as we'll see in future presentations, to one PDF file using a Qt PDF printer, which is typically free, which we'll see later. So I'm going to save this for now, and I have that here. And then we'll put together multiple reports as we go, and then maybe I'll show you how we can put all those reports on one Excel file, and then use that Excel file possibly to make one master report. In other words, if you're going to give this to a client, you would like to most likely save these so I can do the formatting as easy as possible, as much formatting in QuickBooks as possible. Export it to Excel is an option, allowing me to do a further touch-ups, but I don't want to have to do too much over there to customize it, putting all the reports then that I want to batch together in a similar fashion so that I can easily just print them out, export them to Excel, and then use Excel to print them all to one PDF file. Well, that's one way to group them. The other way to group them is using this management report tool, which doesn't have as much customization, but gives you a pretty standard look and feel. Although again, it's going to be looking very much the same as what other people might be doing, right? Right, Ara?
Yeah, it's like wearing the same suit to every wedding. Safe, but nobody remembers you.
That's right. Or they just remember you as the same dang suit. But that's what I don't have that many. Anyway, whatever. It's better than being the guy with the weird suit. Maybe I don't know. I'm not getting into that. Why did you take me there, Ara? Okay.